Welcome back. So we just had a really interesting discussion about the questions that need to be asked by executives who are thinking about AI, or at least assessing solutions that their teams are bringing up to them. I want to focus our next discussion a little more narrowly on the executives who might be dipping their toes into the AI space and pose the question, what are the prerequisites? What are the things that need to be there to be ready for AI? So, if you're earlier on this maturity curve that we've spent some time discussing, you're just getting started, what has to be in place? Trisha, I actually want to start with you. So you teach in the space generally around ethics. You think about things like responsible use. Because it's a little bit different, I mean, what would you say there? What are the prerequisites?
Thanks. I think part of what we need to realize when we're thinking of AI is that there's both a lot that we're building off of already, especially if we're thinking of security or data, governance requirements, etc., as well as more generally within this space, anything that we're dealing with for discrimination or fairness, etc., that there's actually probably a lot that you could leverage within the organization. But then also specifically on AI, a lot of the work that has been done within the space of governance has been self-regulatory codes of conducts, guidelines for trustworthy human-centric AI. And although these principles are high level, I do think they provide a really good starting point to kind of think of what the headlines are that you need to think of. So, for instance, thinking of human agency and oversight within what you're developing, or the robustness and the safety. This speaks to the security, privacy and data governance. Transparency is a really interesting one, I think, where transparency is never going to be enough, but both internally to your organization, by documenting everything that you're doing, it helps to kind of think through, okay, what are those points, those questions in addition that we need to be thinking through. Diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness as another principle, the societal and environmental well-being, and as well as accountability mechanisms. Thinking specifically kind of diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness, I think some of the questions that you can ask really speak to where are you on this curve, or how far have you thought of it? Do you have a strategy or a set of procedures for avoiding the creating or the reinforcement of unfair bias? Those types of questions, I think, can help your team, but also your organization to think through what is it really that we're working with, and these types of guidelines are available, right? So really the point is leveraging what is available, both in terms of what's already in the space of your organization, as well as available ethics guidelines that there are on AI.
Okay, so I think my high-level summary of what you're saying is there's a number of principles that need to be thought through in some form before you might embark on the AI journey. Is that fair?
Exactly.
Okay. Cece, let me actually ask you to tag in. So you teach at Columbia Business School. I know some of your space is very similar. What would you add?
So my lens is a little bit more marketing.
Okay.
I would say, maybe this is the educator, have an understanding of what you want to learn about this AI space. The entire ecosystem is evolving quickly. And so because it is evolving quickly, we're making mistakes left and right. We are taking risks. We are running experiments. Some things are working, some things are not working. If you're serious as a leader that you want to do this AI thing, be clear about what you want to learn from it. And so that way you can manage the expectations around, we are going to make mistakes, we are going to find wins. And more specifically, I would argue, think about your offensive versus defensive strategy. So on the offensive side, where are we going to create value for our consumer? So from the consumer's lens, where am I going to make their lives easier? Okay, that's a proactive strategy. Excellent. You can have someone work on that. On the defensive side, where do I want to create efficiencies in my ecosystem, in my working processes? Is there places to automate so I can free up potential staff time to do other things? So those are two very simple ways to think about, okay, can I actually leverage AI to build opportunities for potential revenue or to create efficiencies to reduce cost?
I like that. So, okay, we're talking about what are the prerequisites, what has to be in place before you embark on this journey. We have the principles that you need to think through. I like what you added in terms of you need to know your learning agenda, you need to know your strategy. Joanne Vincent, I think the two of you think about this very practically. So what else needs to be there?
So yes, I think I'm going to go very pragmatically to say what do you have to build on. So I think, what principles do you have? I think what is your strategy? And I like the idea of, are you going after something on the offensive side? Is this going to be an area where you're going to build a business? Or do you want to try to do something where it's on the defensive side, where you're looking for opportunities for efficiencies, expense management, and oftentimes that's a great place to learn because it's not customer facing, there may be less risk, you may have an opportunity to look at a process internal to your organization, and therefore you have a little bit more time to learn. But from a pragmatic perspective, what do you have that you can begin to leverage as you begin this kind of, if it is a new journey for you, or you've already been on the journey? And so the way that I think about it is that first there's kind of this scoping moment of offensive and defensive, but that should be the team. What team will you be giving that to? Is that your strategic planning team or a business strategy team that's going to help you kind of form and norm the use cases that you're going to be exploring, right? So there's scoping, and that would usually be your strategy team leading it, but do you have any AI or data science experts that are going to participate in that? What are your domain experts? And then once you do that, then there's this moment of, are you using internal data? So what are your data assets, right? Are you using third-party data sources? Are you using your own data? And then all of the different data expertise that you would need to have, where are you on that maturity curve? So what's your data quality like? What's it fit for purpose, right? Have you curated those data sets? Meaning, are they organized, right? How structured are they? How unstructured, right? How is AI going to run up against it, right? And then kind of your modeling teams or your true data science teams and engineering teams. And then what's your technology look like that's going to be supporting all of this? I think there's an assessment, a true assessment of where are you from a maturity perspective, and then what's your process that connects all of that? And then lastly, of course, is if you're going to deploy this, how are you going to assess the output of this and the outcomes and the efficiency and the effectiveness, right? So is this really going to be a product and a solution, or is this going to be that improvement on to your expense management or to your efficiency? Who's going to be doing that metric, and really who do you need? And then again, all of those supporting teams, right? So that risk management lens of your legal team, your privacy team, your security teams. There's an awful lot that you need to assess. And if you don't have those skills in-house, where are you going to get them? Some people have talked about acquisitions previously, or are you going to go purchase them in the marketplace? And then if you're going to do that, who's going to assess those vendors? So I think that's really pragmatically the frame that I would begin to put together for a team or an executive to begin to assess where are you to just begin the conversation.
What would you say, I really like your perspective there. There's probably a logical follow-up of, how much needs to be in place to get started versus how much of that can be built over time. What counsel would you give executives who might be weighing that?
I think it depends on what you want to achieve, right?
Okay.
I do think you need something if you want to get started right away. One of the challenges of this space is that there's a sense of urgency that people want to learn this fast. And if you don't have anything that I've just mentioned in place, you're going to really struggle in getting this, up and running. So then your best bet is probably to partner with an external vendor who can at least come in and help you set this up quickly, right?
Okay.
If you have pieces of this, and again, every firm is different, every organization is different, then I think you have to, again, assess, are you going to do an efficiency play? Well, then maybe it's easier to actually cobble together a team because you have pieces and parts. But again, depending upon what your true full assessment is it may take you more time, so it may be better to buy versus build.
Okay. Speaking of external vendors, Vincent, your day job is to help companies get started in AI, at least one of your day jobs. What would you add? What pieces need to be there versus what can be built over time?
Yeah, I mean, this was a great list provided by my colleagues here. I would say the things I'd add here, one is, especially in the generative space, it's really important just to understand the legal risks that are associated with that and what you're doing contractually to help mitigate it. Because these things are not well established or well defined in terms of who's ultimately responsible for making sure you're not infringing on copyright, making sure you're not infringing on intellectual property. And these laws, as they're written today, are strict liability. So you can end up being liable even if you had nothing to do with the creation of the model. So just understanding that and making sure your counsel, your in-house counsel is aware of what's going on is an important thing that I think a lot of people just aren't aware of. More broadly, though, I really think it comes down to how is this going to strategically differentiate your company? And it's a really difficult and interesting question to wrestle with because it determines a lot of, to your question, where do I get started? Do I just do it? Do I buy it? Do I help somebody else? A lot of it depends on how strategic is it to your company and what is my durable competitive advantage for the long term. Because if it's going to be, this is my moat, this is how I make my business better than all of my competitors, you better go all in. And you better ensure that you're leveraging asymmetry information, your data, the stuff you know that nobody else knows has to be core to that. And understanding like that becomes very different than, well, look, I just need some generic next best action on my website. Okay, great. Use a vendor. It's not differentiated for you. It's not core to your business. Awesome. Just go get that done quickly and cheaply and efficiently. And it also is really important because there was a great paper published by Google, and it was called Machine Learning, the new high-interest credit card technical debt. And this is really true. These models do require constant fixing,
Care and feeding.
updating, care and feeding. Exactly right, Joanne. And so just realizing when you're starting the process, going into it eyes wide open, makes a huge difference about what decisions you're going to make through that entire evolution, what other teams need to be present during this process, how far down that path am I really going to go? And all that fundamentally hinges on, is this my competitive advantage, or is this just something to keep up with my competitors?
And I would just add on the competitive advantage piece. I think what you also, and I think what is top of mind for many executives, it's not just the competitive advantage, but I think we are in a moment of incredible disruption potential. And so I think the other thing that needs to be examined strategically for many organizations is what is this disruption and disintermediation moment going to mean to my industry and to me in my place in that industry? And so is my firm ripe for disintermediation?
Right.
And if so, then what do I need to change and what do I need to shift in this strategic moment? And so it may be that I can become an advantaged player by making some changes, or it may be that if I don't make these changes now, I'm going to be disintermediated, and so now I need to actually shift my business strategy. And I think that's why this strategy moment, right? That's why I always start there, is super important. I think that's why Vincent starts there too. I think that assessment, and Cece started there as well, if you don't know why you're doing this, right, it's very difficult to then do the assessment of what you need.
Cece, I want to come back to you. So you brought up the offensive strategy, defensive strategy.
So what I really loved about Vincent's comments, I think leaders really do need to be very, very eyes wide open, very aware. There are actually two cares in feedings. The first one is related to the technology, the IP, the AI or machine learning or whatever models you are going to put eventually into production. It requires maintenance. It's not set it and forget it. On the other side, you may be changing your business strategy. Therefore, people are involved. So people to address the change management, that is maintenance. Why? You're changing people's behaviors. Guess what? It takes a long time for people to change their behaviors. And so, yes, technology is very important, but I'm always going to advocate the people side. You also need to maintain and align incentives, motivations, and behaviors such that they can move along with whatever pivot or whatever changes to strategy the firm may choose.
Good addition.
I think it's a really good point, and I think this is why I always kind of joke. I think it's more honest than more a joke, frankly. which is that data science and machine learning, because it's disruptive and transformative in its nature, is actually an organizational change management discipline.
It is.
And so if you actually want this to be implemented and leveraged to give you the value that we keep talking about, it means you have to run your business differently.
Yes.
And I think the big challenge that a lot of CEOs are going to be facing over the next, call it 3 to 5 years, if not sooner, is who's actually responsible for making sure these things deliver value. So we know that data is going to be critical. We know that today data is by and large siloed. Marketing has data, IT has data, operations have their data, finance has their data. They're not currently connected. We also know that if you connect them, you do get a better, more holistic experience for your customers at the end of the day, understanding what's going on for your business. And so who's really responsible for going across the organization now in a true horizontal capability and ensuring that not only are each of the business needs met for their traditional business, but this new novel integration?
But I think that's a data skill set, not just a technical skill set, right? So if you think about it today, in those silos, there are data domain experts, right, who understand that data, right? So the difference between HR data, right, and financial data is pretty significant, right? There's two different skill sets that people have that, work in those fields, right? And we like that, right? We hopefully will inculcate, right, into the future that data domain experts are one of the new positions that we recognize that exist today, but we maybe don't call these people by those names yet. But I think they're part of the design moment, right, as well as the outcome and output moment, right, as we examine the outcomes from AI and generative AI, how are we using this information, and then also refining the input data, right? So I think that to your point, I think we're in for a lot of change management, but some of the expertise that's already out there, I think we just have to refine how we're looking at it in this moment in time and bring those capabilities and the capacity together so that we get better outcomes overall.
Trisha, I'm gonna come back to you, but this is a fantastic list. What I have written down so far, we started with what are the principles that need to be thought through. We added what's the learning agenda that you're going after. We talked about you need to know your strategy, both this offensive, defensive, as well as what's the competitive advantage, what's the strategic fit. We added in what are you going to leverage to start? So what are the use cases? Joanne, you brought up the idea of an assessment. Vincent, you added what are the contractual mitigations that you might put in place to mitigate risks? We talked about ongoing monitoring, both technology and the people side, and then the change management. I really like that list. I want to get very punchy. So here's my question to you all. You're an executive, you're getting started on the journey. I'm not negating this entire list, but what is the one thing that must be there? You just get one. Where would you go?
I think whatever process you're embarking on needs to be inclusive, and we've spoken about it being inclusive across the organization. I also think it needs to be inclusive in then also thinking of the types of data that you're using, but whether that data itself is inclusive or exclusive, right? So having a diversity of viewpoints present, but also making sure that whatever you are using is diverse in the way that you're approaching the process. So this kind of brings it back to what is it that you have in place that actually you're ensuring that there's no bias in the data itself, right? Or in the, we were talking about hallucinations earlier, in then the outcomes, outputs that are present in the data that you have. So I would say the diversity is key in what you're doing. Okay,
that's great. I think what you're raising is potentially even a broader issue of the quality of your data. It becomes very important.
Yeah.
Cece, what one thing?
First of all, I want it on record. Don't like the question, but I will answer it anyway. I want more. If you want to do this properly, you really do need more pieces on the board.
Okay.
But if you are going to have only one piece to get yourself started, I would argue being very clear about a defensive internal friction, a problem you want to solve.
Okay.
Because it is small enough that you can demonstrate while mitigating risk to any externalities. It is concrete enough that you can build alliances around stakeholders to show them this can actually work. And then more importantly, you build confidence yourself as a leader to say, I can actually do this.
Objections to the question noted, but I love your answer. Joanne, where would you go?
Objections also, because I think picking one is, I think organizational will is really important. And I mean that from the top to the bottom, right? I think right now there's an awful lot of conversation. People want to jump into using this new tool, but if there's not really an appetite to do so, and I really do, and I think it is a leadership moment, the whole organization will feel that kind of waffling. And because we just have talked about how much change management is required, without that leadership, and the leadership really does need to be more than just the CEO or the board chair or the head of AI or the head of data or the CIO. I think you have to have that sense that this is an exciting moment for everybody. But that takes leadership that really spreads throughout the organization.
That's great.
Yeah, that's a really good one. All of them are really good, frankly, and I'll choose those three plus mine. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Objection noted.
Yeah. Thank you. Exactly. Look, I would say it's a really hard question because we, I think, collectively understand just how impactful this is going to be on corporate America, corporate world, if you will. And there's a lot that you want to make sure you get right. I will also note that it is a nascent space without too many places to point to with like, hey, this is how they transform from a legacy traditional company, heritage company, all the way through this really innovative, cutting edge, digital AI-driven company. So it's really hard to say, oh, I'm going to go do that, or this worked really well over here, this didn't work well. So if you go and choose one, my answer would be, I would take the strategy approach. I would identify sort of a portfolio of ideas that you want to go. And the big piece here is some really quick wins. Because frankly, Silicon Valley, I think, got this right back in the era of like, just move fast and break stuff. You're going to learn so much more by just doing something, even though it's probably not quite right. It's really not done the right way, not with the right principles, not with the right strategy holistically, but you're going to learn so much organizationally of where are my biggest friction points, to your point. What are theory constraints? Where are my biggest constraints in the organization that I have to go solve if I want to scale this across my business? And so I'd say just get started with anything that's small, easy, ideally not too risky. Internal processes are a good place to do that. Something that's just iteratively one step further from where I am today. Like, oh, well, we have all these business rules written. What if we just kind of integrated that there? It's that one little piece. I think that's probably what I would say, is just get started with something small, low risk. Don't go do massive, go sell all my data or something like this. It's a terrible plan always, I'll just tell you frankly. But like, just don't do something too risky from that standpoint, but just get started.
Thank you for honoring the question. I think these are four really good things. So identify the quick wins. Fits quite nicely with your start with what is the problem you're going to solve. Start with, do you have the leadership, the will to actually go after this? And data quality, diversity of data. Do you have the right inputs, if you will?
And I would also say diversity of viewpoints, right? This speaks back to what we were indicating of it needing to be something inclusive within your organization, right? People come with different skill sets, but also different perspectives of how it might be useful in their particular department or the processes that they're involved in, right? So I think it's two things.
Okay, that's great.
Well, that point is interesting because we're all sort of seasoned in this life, if you will, and we all came with a slightly different answer to you, and so then it comes back to the CEO or the decision makers, ultimately maybe the board. These are all the right answer in some context, I'm certain of it.
Yes.
If you're a large organization with a lot to lose, I think the risk mitigation stance might be the right place to start. You just have a lot to lose. You're really the incumbent in the market. I think other people, small organizations, would choose sort of this thing. So I think, to your point, I think diversity is really important.
And I think, and just to if you are a leader that's going to embark and you picked one of our 4 answers or all of our answers to implement, I think the best thing you can do to set up your team, your organization, yourself for success, give yourselves the space to make the mistake, to learn.
Was that your way of sneaking in an additional answer?
Yes. Thank you. Clever.
I love it. Trish, Cece, Joanne, Vincent, thank you so much for weighing in on the topic. I love your inputs here.
Thank you.
Thank you.